Breaking. Donald Trump sues the degenerate New York Times for $15 billion. The defamation and libel suit was filed in the great state of Florida because, well, look, if you read the president's social media, it was because the Times endorsed Kamala Harris on the front page. It was a highly sophisticated system of document and visual alteration, which was, in effect, a malicious form of defamation and an attack on your favorite president, me, my family, business, the America First movement, MAGA, and our nation as a whole. So, will Trump be backing up that money truck to the New York Times building and filling it up with cash? Is this going to go down like the lawsuits against CBS and ABC with a multi-million-dollar gift to the Trump Presidential Library, an entity which, by the way, does not exist? Or will this one get dismissed out of the gate like so many of the president's other high-profile legal claims? And what exactly is Trump so mad about? Rule 8 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure says that a pleading should contain a short and plain statement of the grounds for the court's jurisdiction, a short and plain statement of the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief, and a demand for the relief sought. This complaint begins with Donald Trump's win in the 2024 presidential election, which it describes as the greatest personal and political achievement in American history, which is a weird way to say your reputation has been shredded and the New York Times has to give you $15 billion to make you whole. Although it does say that the achievement is even more amazing because President Trump had to overcome persistent election interference from the legacy media, led most notoriously by the New York Times. The complaint goes on to call the New York Times a full-throated mouthpiece of the Democrat Party, whose editorial routine is now one of industrial-scale defamation and libel against political opponents. As evidence of this, it points to the Times' endorsement of Kamala Harris and an editorial calling for an end to the Senate filibuster. Hey, you know who else called to end the Senate filibuster? Finally, on page 5, we get to the gravamen of this complaint, a malicious, defamatory, and disparaging book written by 2 of its reporters and 3 false, malicious, defamatory, and disparaging articles, all carefully crafted by defendants with actual malice, calculated to inflict maximum damage upon President Trump, and all published during the height of a presidential election that became the most consequential in American history. Okay. Trump is mad about the book Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune and Created the Illusion of Success, which was written by New York Times reporters Russ Buettner and Suzanne Craig. The book was published in September of 2024 by Penguin Random House LLC, which is why that company is also a named defendant. Trump is also mad about a handful of articles written at the Times by Buettner, Craig, and their colleagues Peter Baker and Mike Schmidt. So what part of the book and articles is defamatory? Are we about to hear about that? No, we are not. Now it is time for more North Korea-style praise for the plaintiff. His decades of magnificent real estate achievements, his remarkable performance as the star of The Apprentice, his sui generis charisma and unique business acumen, the cultural magnitude of President Trump's singular brilliance, which captured the zeitgeist of our time, the world-renowned Trump brand that consumers have long associated with excellence, luxury, and success in entertainment, hospitality, and real estate, among many other industries, his transcendent ability to defy wrongful conventions, and his one-of-a-kind, unprecedented personal brand alone, which is reasonably estimated to be worth over $100 billion. The complaint lists his many real estate holdings and business projects. It even includes some of the ones that went belly up, like Trump Taj Mahal and the U.S. Football League, but not Trump University, Trump Airlines, or Trump Steaks. It lists his many books, including Think Big and Kick-Ass in Business and Life, and it includes a non-exhaustive recitation of his hundreds of history-making media appearances and roles on such programs as WrestleMania 5, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and The Nanny. We are 33 pages into an 85-page complaint. We are still waiting to find out what specifically the defendants did to the plaintiff, but we do know that the plaintiff had a cameo on ABC's long-running soap opera All My Children, and honestly, if I'd shared a screen with Suzanne Lucci, I'd lead with that one too. Finally, on page 37, we kind of get to the point. Trump is mad because Buettner and Craig say that Mark Burnett, the legendary producer of The Apprentice, discovered Trump and made him a star, aka the absurd, fanciful, and false story that President Trump somehow owes his public persona and celebrity status to Burnett and other NBC executives. The President of the United States is suing reporters for saying he was only sort of famous in the late 90s, when in fact only President Trump had the necessary combination of actual business achievement, charisma, fame, personality, intellect, and instinctual comfort in front of a television audience that could drive the show to television heights. And he's angry about reporting on his father's finances and the way the extended Trump family used creative accounting to shift money into their own pockets before Trump's dad, Fred Trump, died. Craig Buettner and reporter David Barstow reported this extensively back in 2018 after Trump's niece, Mary Trump, gave them thousands of pages of financial documents. They allege that Trump and his siblings set up a sham corporation to disguise millions of dollars in gifts from their parents, and that Trump helped formulate a strategy to undervalue his parents' real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars on tax returns, sharply reducing the tax bill when those properties were transferred to him and his siblings. Fred Trump built huge apartment buildings that were owned by trusts for the benefit of his 5 children. Donald and his siblings owned thousands of apartment units when they were just teenagers. Then Fred hired Donald to manage those same apartments and even let him set up an adjacent business renting air conditioners to tenants. Most of that was perfectly legal, although, as the article points out, it strongly undercuts President Trump's presentation as a self-made man. The article also highlights the ways in which Fred Trump's real estate business cashed in on government programs. From federal rent subsidies to government-backed loans, the Trump family benefited over and over again from government largesse. And that's kind of the American dream, right? But part of that deal is that you gotta give back. You gotta pay your taxes. You can't just give it all to your kids at the end of the day. You can give each of them a $10,000 a year, after which you have to pay something called gift tax. And when you die, if you are very wealthy, you have to give some of your money back to Uncle Sam. That's called estate tax. We as a country have decided that massive transfers of inherited wealth are a bad idea because they make society less equal. Now, we don't make poor people pay estate tax, and we don't even make rich people pay it either anymore. As of today, if you have less than $15 million, your estate's not going to get taxed. And for married couples, that number is $30 million. So unless you are very, very rich, the estate tax is going to be a non-issue for you and your kids. But back in 1999, when Donald Trump's father, Fred, died, the cutoff was much lower. It was $650,000, after which the government was going to take a pretty big bite. So before Fred Trump died, the family did a whole bunch of stuff to transfer as much cash as possible to the kids. And one of the things that they did was set up this middleman company called All County Building Supply and Maintenance. All County was owned by the Trump kids, and it stood in between the Trump family business and its vendors, drastically marking up the purchase price of everything the business bought and then pocketing the difference. So here's how that worked at one Trump property called Beach Haven Apartments. In 1991 and 1992, Fred Trump bought 78 refrigerator stove combinations for Beach Haven from Long Island appliance wholesalers. The average price was $642.69. But in 1993, when he began paying All County for refrigerator stove combinations, the price jumped by 46%. Likewise, the price he paid for trash compacting services at Beach Haven increased 64%. Janitorial supplies went up more than 100%. Plumbing repairs and supplies rose 122%. And that extra money came out of the business and into his kids' bank accounts since the Trump siblings were All County. Those revelations were highly embarrassing for the Trump family when they appeared in the Times back in 2018. Trump's sister Marianne Trump Barry, who was a sitting federal judge at the time, retired shortly after the story went to press. Back in 2018, Trump's lawyer Charles Harder threatened to sue the Times if it printed the story. He said, should the Times state or imply that President Trump participated in fraud, tax evasion, or any other crime, it will be exposing itself to substantial liability and damages for defamation. But Trump did not sue for defamation in 2018. Instead, he filed a complaint 2 years later for tortious interference with contract. The theory was that Mary Trump breached the confidentiality agreement she signed when she sued her uncles and aunts over her grandfather's estate. And Trump said that the Times and its reporters were liable for that breach because they put her up to it. The judge dismissed the case against the paper and the reporters, although not against Mary, and forced Trump to pay almost $400,000 in legal fees to the Times under New York's anti-SLAPP law. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation, and New York's law, which was passed in part as a response to Trump suing the media all the time, penalizes plaintiffs for filing abusive lawsuits as a means of inhibiting free speech. But then, in 2024, Craig and Buettner incorporated all their earlier reporting about the family business into the book Lucky Loser, plus lots of new stuff about Trump's finances and the apprentice years, all of which was no doubt very embarrassing to the president. But is it defamatory? Well, we're going to get into it. But let's talk for a minute about how the media is covering all of this. Trump's lawsuit is a story that has profound consequences for journalism, and so it's no surprise that it was covered by a whopping 700 sources, with 29% of coverage from the left, 48% from the center, and 24% from the right. But depending on which sources you read, the headlines tell different stories about what legal experts are saying. From the left, the lawyers at LegalReader framed Trump as enraged and put defamation in quotes, suggesting his case has no legal credibility. From the center, legal experts doubt Trump's chances, implying a distant but not trivial chance his suit could succeed. And from the right, attorney Brito seems absolutely positively sure that the New York Times went after Trump with actual malice. Now, if you didn't know that attorney Brito is representing Trump in this case, you might assume that legal experts think this case is a slam dunk in Trump's favor from the headline alone. The headlines you read first have immense power to shape how you understand the news, and that's why I like to see the news from as many angles as I can with the help of today's sponsor, Ground News. And right now, they're offering LegalEagle viewers 40% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. Scan the QR code or use the link in the description to get the discount for a limited time. Ground News gathers related articles from around the world and across the political spectrum so you can see the bias and compare coverage. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. And they just added a feature that covers podcasts on major stories. I also love their blind spot feature, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum, like this story of an Ohio congressman begging Trump to invade Cleveland. But you would have never seen this story if you only got your news from a few sources. 60% of the coverage of this concerning story came from the center and 40% from the right. But that's why Ground News is my favorite way to get the news. And as a legal eaglet, you can save 40% off the Ground News Vantage subscription by scanning the code on screen or clicking the link down below. This subscription gives you unlimited access to every feature, including the Bias Insight tool and the blind spot feed. By subscribing, you'll support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent and balanced. So click the link below or scan the code today, and we will see you in court. Defamation is a common law tort that involves 1, a false statement of fact. That is, fact, not opinion. So if I say, you're ugly and your mother dresses you funny, that's not defamation. It's mean, but it's my opinion and I'm entitled to say it. And really, you've got to do something about those shoes. Number 2, publication. That is, it has to be shared with some third party. If I text you and say, you ran over your neighbor's dog, that's not defamation, even if it wasn't true, because it wasn't published. If I put it on the neighborhood listserv, that's another story. Number 3, fault. The speaker has to have some level of culpability, usually negligence. So if you lie and tell me you ran over the neighbor's dog because you're a weirdo whose mom dresses you funny, you can't turn around and sue me for defamation if I repeat it. And number 4, damages. The plaintiff has to have been actually harmed. So here's a fun example. You know the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell? He sued the Daily Mail in 2021 over a story saying that he'd had a secret romance with the actress Jane Krakowski, and the court said, no, it's not defamatory to say that a single guy dated a beautiful actress, because even if it was true, it wouldn't harm his reputation. Lindell might have been embarrassed or annoyed by this tabloid article, to be sure, but he only challenges aspects of the article that described routine acts accepted by society. The end, you lose. Now, Mike Lindell is a public figure, and so is Donald Trump. So they have an additional hurdle to prove defamation in court, thanks to the 1964 Supreme Court case, New York Times v. Sullivan. The court said that public figures have to meet a higher threshold to recover for defamation. They have to prove that the speaker either knew that the defamatory statement was false or spoke with reckless disregard for the truth. That's called the actual malice standard, or the Sullivan standard, and it is a very high burden. It's almost impossible to meet. So the way to evaluate the supposedly defamatory statements in Trump's complaint against the New York Times is to ask if they were false, if the reporters had reason to know that they were false under the Sullivan standard for actual malice, and if they were harmful. We'll give them that publication one because obviously they were published. Okay, let's look at these supposedly defamatory statements. Trump's complaint alleges dozens of defamatory statements in the book and articles. Many of them involve the Trump family business. For instance, Trump takes issue with this quote: "A plan was soon devised to funnel some of Fred's cash to Donald and his 3 siblings. They would accomplish that goal by adding a sham layer to Fred's business, one designed to evade the gift and estate taxes. They would call that extra layer all-county building supply and maintenance. It would serve no purpose beyond creating an off-ramp to send cash to his children. This implies that the Trump family criminally violated relevant federal tax laws through the use of a shell corporation, and the authors knew that neither Fred Trump, President Trump, nor the family committed criminal tax evasion." Okay, so 3 things jump out here. First, as a threshold matter, dead people cannot sue for defamation, so nothing the paper says about Fred Trump can be defamatory. They can write that he's the love child of Mike Lindell and Jane Krakowski. Doesn't matter, and honestly, I kind of see it. Second, truth is an absolute defense to defamation. So the question isn't whether the all-county scheme was criminal. The question is whether it was designed to evade gift and estate taxes by creating an off-ramp to send cash to the kids. And if it wasn't, did the authors and publishers know that the allegation was false? Here, the Times published those all-county invoices showing the markups on the boilers and the janitorial supplies, so good luck there. And same for this one. The family fortune that launched Donald Trump was built on government programs designed to ease the pain caused by the Great Depression and World War II and to assist veterans returning from that war. And his father, Fred, wrung millions of additional dollars from those programs by twisting the rules. Many of the supposedly defamatory statements involve Trump being discovered by apprentice producer Mark Burnett. But is it a statement of fact or opinion to say that Mr. Trump had mostly luck to credit for being discovered at age 57 by Mark Burnett, then the hottest name in the hottest new television genre? Now, it's definitely a statement of fact to say that the first thing Burnett's producers noticed when they arrived on the 26th floor of the Trump Tower was the stink, a musty and moldy carpet smell that seemed to emanate from every corner. As they walked through with eyes trained to notice small details, they saw the chipped wood on seemingly every piece of furniture. But the next paragraph of the article quotes apprentice producer Bill Pruitt saying, "When you go into the office and you're hearing billionaire, even recovering billionaire, you don't expect to see chipped furniture. You don't expect to smell carpet that needs to be refreshed in the worst way." So good luck proving that the reporters knew all that stuff about the carpet was false. In fact, most of these defamation allegations are very unserious. Trump is mad that a guy he went to high school with says he loaned him a jacket with a lot of medals on it for picture day. And he's mad that his niece says he cheated on the SATs. And he's mad that the paper reported that Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, said that the president was a fan of Hitler. Trump says that cannot possibly be true because lots of Jewish people voted for him. And also he moved the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. And oh my God, what even is this? Just look at this paragraph describing how they get to actual malice. Defendants each desire for President Trump to fail politically and financially. Each feels actual malice toward President Trump in the colloquial sense. That is, each, Craig, Buettner, Baker, and Schmidt, as individuals, and the Times and Penguin's relevant executives as corporations, subjectively wishes to harm President Trump, and each wish to manipulate public opinion to President Trump's disadvantage to worsen his current and future political and economic prospects. Put bluntly, defendants baselessly hate President Trump in a deranged way. And you know what? That could all be true. Each and every one of these individuals and corporate entities could hate Trump with the fire of 1,000 suns and write with the explicit goal of damaging his political and economic prospects. And as a legal matter, that would be wholly irrelevant because the only thing that matters is whether they knew what they'd written about him was false. And you can't prove that by simply stating in conclusory fashion over and over again, they totally knew it. As friend of the channel Ken White put it, this is a stunningly pathological lawsuit, even by Trumpian standards. It reads as if he was holding a gun to the head of the child of the lawyer drafting it. Yeah. Let's talk about those lawyers. Now, Donald Trump is no stranger to filing lawsuits. He sued CNN for using the phrase "the big lie" because it made him sound like a Nazi. He sued the Washington Post for reporting on the Russia investigation. He sued Simon & Schuster and the reporter Bob Woodward for publishing audio of interviews recorded for Woodward's book. He sued New York Attorney General Letitia James to stop her subpoenaing documents. He sued E. Jean Carroll for accusing him of sexual assault. He's currently suing the Des Moines Register for whiffing a poll, which he's trying to pretend is the same thing as consumer fraud. He's suing the Wall Street Journal for saying he drew boobs on a birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein. He once sued Hillary Clinton, James Comey, and his own Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein for doing the RICO to him. That case got him slapped with $1 million in sanctions, with the judge calling out Trump's deliberate use of a frivolous lawsuit for an improper purpose as part of a playbook that includes provocative and boastful rhetoric, attacks on political opponents and the news media, and disregard for legal principles and precedent. And even graded on the Trump troll suit curve, this case is worse. The lawyers here are Alejandro Brito, Edward Paltzik, and Daniel Epstein. Brito is a litigator from Coral Gables, Florida, who represents Trump in his suit against the Wall Street Journal. You know, the one where the president said it was defamatory to write about his birthday card to Jeffrey Epstein. Pay no attention to that pubic hair signature. Paltzik and Epstein are MAGA guys who invented the idea that Trump should refashion his defamation suits as consumer fraud cases to avoid anti-SLAPP laws and the First Amendment. Their theory is that writing an untrue article amounts to a fraud on the readers. It hasn't worked in court yet, although CBS did settle Trump's Texas suit saying that it was illegal to edit Kamala Harris's 60 Minutes interview. Of course, CBS's parent company Paramount needed the Trump administration's approval for its $8 billion merger with Skydance, and hey, what do you know? After CBS agreed to give Trump, his presidential library, $16 million, the administration approved the deal. And okay, to be scrupulously fair to Brito, he did manage to negotiate a similar settlement with ABC after George Stephanopoulos said that a jury found Trump liable for rape. In fact, the jury found him liable for sexual assault. But let's not get this twisted. There is a big difference between an off-the-cuff comment on live TV and a deeply reported book against a serial litigant that's been fact-checked to hell and back. Do you know what it's like to be fact-checked by a major publishing house? It's not fun. This lawsuit is an attempt to intimidate the New York Times into changing the way it covers the Trump administration. And the president has really made no bones about that. Here he is once again bragging about teaching the media a lesson. Multiple First Amendment scholars spoke to CNN, and they all agreed that the lawsuit was an abuse of the legal process. Harvard law professor Rebecca Tushnet called it a statement of contempt for the truth, the American public, the judicial process, and everything that deserves our respect in the American tradition. But she warned that picking through its legal defects, such as the complaints about statements about Fred Trump, a deceased man who cannot be defamed, risks ignoring its purpose to threaten any criticism of Trump. First Amendment scholar Ronelle Anderson-Jones agreed that the merits of this case aren't the point. She said multi-billion-dollar libel suits are famously expensive to defend, even if the publishers are ultimately successful. My guess is the primary goals here are to have a legal filing that acts as a manifesto against the press to lodge an action that will be staggeringly expensive to defend, and to hope the suit will once again provide leverage against a powerful source of critical investigative reporting. And Trump has admitted that he files lawsuits that he knows he can't win for the purpose of ruining his opponents with legal bills. In 2006, he sued reporter Tim O'Brien over the book Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald, claiming that it defamed him by undervaluing his net worth. Trump got totally wiped out in court, but he said he didn't regret it because, quote, I spent a couple of bucks on legal fees and they spent a whole lot more. I did it to make his life miserable, which I'm happy about. As for the New York Times, they appear to be standing strong. The paper called the suit an attempt to stifle and discourage independent reporting and vowed that it will not be deterred by intimidation tactics. We will continue to pursue the facts without fear or favor and stand up for journalists' First Amendment right to ask questions on behalf of the American people. And you know what? So does this channel.
And breaking news, you don't have to take our word for it that this complaint is BS dog excrement. Even though President Trump stacked the Middle District of Tampa, where he filed this suit, with Trump hacks, 4 of the 5 judges were appointed by Trump in his last term, the case was assigned to senior Judge Stephen Mereday, an H.W. Bush appointee. And Judge Mereday is not happy with the complaint. On the court's own motion, he struck Trump's complaint for failure to comply with Rule 8 of the Rules of Civil Procedure, which requires a complaint contain, quote, a short and plain statement of the claim showing that the pleader is entitled to relief. And the court, in a short order, absolutely lays into Trump, his lawyers, and the complaint that they filed. He says, quote, even under the most generous and lenient application of Rule 8, the complaint is decidedly improper and impermissible. The pleader initially alleges an electoral victory by President Trump, quote, in historic fashion by trouncing the opponent, and alludes to, quote, persistent election interference from the legacy media led most notoriously by the New York Times. The pleader alludes to, quote, the halcyon days of the newspaper, but complains the newspaper has become a, quote, full-throated mouthpiece of the Democrat Party, which allegedly resulted in the deranged endorsement of President Trump's principal opponent in the most recent presidential election. The reader of the complaint must labor through allegations such as, quote, a new journalistic low for the hopelessly compromised and tarnished gray lady. The reader must endure an allegation of, quote, the desperate need to defame with a partisan spear rather than report with an authentic look looking glass, and an allegation that, quote, the false narrative about The Apprentice was just the tip of defendant's melting iceberg of falsehoods. Similarly, in one of many often repetitive and laudatory towards President Trump, but superfluous allegations, the pleader states, quote, The Apprentice represented the cultural magnitude of President Trump's singular brilliance, which captured the zeitgeist of our time. The complaint continues with allegations in defense of President Trump's father, with a protracted list of the many properties owned, developed, or managed by the Trump Organization, and a list of President Trump's many books, with a long account of the history of The Apprentice, with an extensive list of President Trump's media appearances, with a detailed account of other legal actions both by and against President Trump, including an account of the Russia collusion hoax, and incidents of alleged lawfare against President Trump, and with a much more persistently alleged and abundant, florid, and enervating detail. Even assuming all of that, a complaint remains an improper and impermissible place for the tedious and burdensome aggregation of prospective evidence, for the rehearsal of tendentious arguments, or for the protracted recitation and explanation of legal authority putatively supporting the pleader's claim for relief. As every lawyer knows, or is presumed to know, a complaint is not a public forum for vituperation and invective, not a protracted platform to rage against an adversary. A complaint is not a megaphone for public relations, or a podium for a passionate oration at a political rally, or the functional equivalent of the Hyde Park Speaker's Corner. This complaint stands unmistakably and inexcusably athwart of the requirements of Rule 8. This action will begin, will continue, and will end in accord with the rules of procedure and in a professional and dignified manner. The complaint is struck with leave to amend within 28 days. The amended complaint must not exceed 40 pages, excluding only the caption, the signature, and any attachment. So there you have it. That's what this judge already thinks of this particular case. Now, it doesn't end the case, but a lot of those unnecessary allegations are going to be struck before Trump can file a second amended complaint. Well, probably, if they actually do what the judge says. But if you need an actual good lawyer to write a valid complaint, I know a guy. Now, all this highlights why it's so important to get a great lawyer when you're dealing with your own case. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get hundreds of comments and emails from viewers who are dealing with legal problems. And they'd ask, can you help me find a lawyer? How do I know if this attorney is any good? And there's a massive gap in our justice system. It's that people don't know how to find the right lawyer for their specific situation. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, and they end up doing nothing or hiring the first attorney who calls them back. And that really bothered me. So I started to wonder, what if there was a different way? What if we could build a law firm that actually lived up to the values that I talk about on this channel: transparency, accessibility, and putting clients first instead of chasing billable hours. A firm where you don't need to pay anything up front and your lawyers only get paid if you do, to maximize your opportunity for justice. So a few years ago, I decided to fix that problem. I decided to start my own personal injury law firm. And honestly, it wasn't an easy choice. But I realized I was in this unique position. I had this platform, this community, and the experience. Not to get rich, trust me, there are easier ways to make money than starting a law practice. But we did it because access to justice shouldn't be a luxury. Because finding the right legal representation shouldn't feel like playing Russian roulette with your future. And when you work with my firm, you're not just getting a lawyer. You're getting a team that understands that behind every case is a real person with real stakes. If we can't represent you, or you're in a state where we don't practice, we'll take the time to try to match you with an attorney in my personal network of lawyers. A national network of some of the best lawyers in the country who actually specialize in what you're going through, located right where you are, not just whoever happens to be available. So if you're dealing with a personal injury, a car crash, a data breach, sexual harassment, a social security or workers' comp issue, give us a call at the number on screen or click on the link below. Now, I can't represent everyone that watches this channel. I wish I could, but what I can do is make sure that when you need legal help, you have somewhere to turn to that you can trust. So whether it's me handling your case or the incredible attorneys we partnered with, you'll get the same principles of honesty and education that we bring to every video. And if you're dealing with a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, check out the link in the description. Let's have a conversation about how we can help you find not just a lawyer, but the right lawyer for your situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, making sure that when life gets complicated, you don't have to face it alone. Which is why when you need a lawyer, you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team.